My name is Kimberly. I am 28 years old, and my birthday party was in full swing when my father decided to make his final move. Here's your gift: the keys to a beautifully restored 1969 Mustang. You deserve it. My dad announced loudly enough for the entire VIP room to hear, handing my twin sister her present. The room erupted in applause. They all turned to look at me, waiting for the tears. But they forgot what I do for a living. As a property title manager, I don't need to scream or throw a tantrum. I just need to check the public records. And I already had the certified deed in my pocket. The air inside the VIP room smelled of expensive champagne and roasted prime rib. Everyone wore silk or tailored wool. My fingers traced the edges of the folded dollar bill inside my pocket. My thoughts drifted miles away from this manufactured elegance, back to a cramped, poorly lit garage on the outskirts of Phoenix. That place smelled like motor oil, old leather, and sweat. It belonged to my older brother, Jordan. He was the black sheep of this family, the one whose grease-stained hands embarrassed our father at every holiday dinner. My name is Kimberly. I am 28 years old, and I work as a property title manager. I spend 50 hours a week verifying who actually owns what. I look at contracts, deeds, and signatures. It is quiet, methodical work. It taught me exactly how to read between the lines of an empire built on lies. Jordan built his classic car restoration business from the ground up. He worked 16-hour shifts, pouring his soul into rusted engines and shattered windshields. He fixed minivans for single mothers and charged them next to nothing. He possessed a warmth that Craig and Amber utterly lacked. But to our parents, kindness held no market value. Craig worshipped status. He funded Melissa's endless parade of vanity projects, a boutique bakery that folded in 3 months, a tech startup that never launched, a yoga studio that bled money. Melissa was a financial black hole, but she played the part of the obedient golden child. Jordan refused to bow. When he showed up to Thanksgiving in his work boots, Craig mocked his blue-collar life in front of the entire family. Amber just sipped her wine and looked away. She always looked away. I spoke up to defend him exactly once. Craig cut off my college tuition the very next morning. That was his weapon. Money bought compliance. Disobedience bought starvation. 2 years ago, Jordan got sick. It started as a persistent cough and quickly spiraled into something much darker. The medical bills piled up. His garage went quiet. He spent his days hooked up to machines in a sterile hospital room, his body shrinking against the white sheets. Craig finally visited him. I sat in the corner chair, hoping, foolishly, for a moment of parental mercy. Craig stood at the foot of the bed. He pulled a stack of papers from his leather briefcase. He offered zero comfort. He demanded an eviction. Craig claimed legal control over Jordan's garage right there in the intensive care unit. He told my brother the business was a disgrace and the property was being liquidated to fund Melissa's new luxury spa. He stripped a dying man of his only remaining dignity. Jordan just closed his eyes. The fight left him completely. He passed away 3 weeks later. He succumbed not to the illness, but to the crushing weight of betrayal. Craig sold the lifts, the tools, and the property. He erased Jordan's legacy in a matter of days. He kept only one thing. Jordan had spent 5 years restoring a vintage 1969 Mustang. It was his masterpiece. Craig took it. He hid it away in a climate-controlled storage unit. And tonight, he tied a velvet bow to the keys and handed it to the parasite who drained our family dry. The applause echoing around me was meant to celebrate Melissa's shiny new gift. They thought they had buried Jordan. They thought I was just a quiet, helpless outcast sitting at the edge of the table. They broke my brother, and they assumed I would just swallow the grief and fade into the background. They forgot what I do for a living. I deal in permanent records. And tonight, I brought the receipts. People wonder how someone can stay completely silent while their brother's legacy gets robbed in an intensive care unit. They assume silence means surrender. They think you just give up. If I threw a fit in that hospital, Craig would have called security. He thrived on public meltdowns. He used them to label everyone else as unstable. I refused to hand him that victory. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and walked out of the ward. True justice requires an agonizing amount of patience. I had to let him think he won. I had to let him get comfortable. A premature attack gives the enemy time to hide their tracks. I needed to weave a net with absolutely zero legal exits. I buried my grief in paperwork. I spent the next 2 years climbing the ranks as a property title manager. I learned the exact mechanics of how empires change hands. I studied liens, asset transfers, and deeds. My colleagues assumed I was just another corporate workaholic chasing a promotion. They had no idea I was hunting. I spent my nights combing through public county records, tracking every single asset Craig claimed to own. The breakthrough arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. The coffee on my desk was completely cold. The digital scan of the power of attorney Craig used to seize the garage illuminated my computer screen. The signature at the bottom of the page looked shaky, forced. Handwriting is incredibly subjective, though. High-priced lawyers can argue over pen strokes for decades. I needed something absolute, something carved in stone. The circular notary stamp sat in the bottom right corner of the page, the official seal validating the entire document. Arrogance makes criminals remarkably sloppy. Craig spent his entire life believing the rules simply did not apply to his tax bracket. He operated in a bubble of untouchable wealth. He hired some cheap backdoor contact to rubber stamp the paperwork, completely bypassing a legitimate legal review. He never bothered to check the fine print. The expiration date on that notary stamp sat right there in plain ink. It expired 3 months before this date. Craig supposedly had Jordan sign the document. A dead stamp cannot authorize a live contract. The entire power of attorney was a blatant, clumsy forgery. Craig stole a commercial property using a worthless piece of paper. Exposing a forged document only starts a long, messy probate battle. Craig could easily drag that out in court until my bank accounts ran dry. I needed a kill shot. Jordan provided it. 2 days before Craig walked into that hospital room, Jordan made a phone call of his own. My brother knew our father's greed better than anyone. He knew Craig would swoop in the second the monitors flatlined. So, Jordan quietly transferred the actual, verified deed of the commercial lot into an irrevocable trust. The trust document sat perfectly filed in the county registry. Jordan named me the sole beneficiary and the exclusive executor. Craig's forged papers meant absolutely nothing. He spent the last 2 years parading around Phoenix, selling off equipment and buying luxury cars on land he never legally owned. The commercial lot, the remaining assets, and that restored 1969 Mustang parked outside the country club. They all belonged to the trust. They all belonged to me. I spent the weeks leading up to this birthday party executing the trap. I filed the injunctions. I froze the assets with the state of Arizona. I secured the eviction notices. Every single document received a bright red certified county seal. The paperwork was ready. The laughter in the VIP room slowly bled out. The joke had run its course. Dozens of eyes stared at me, waiting for the predictable breakdown. They wanted me to scream or run away crying. I reached into my leather bag. I pulled out a thick manila folder and dropped it dead center on the polished glass table. The heavy slap of paper against glass rattled the expensive silverware. I looked directly at Craig. I kept my voice as flat as a quarterly report. The 1969 Mustang sitting in the valet lot does not belong to you. I said. And the commercial property you liquidated to pay for this ridiculous party never belonged to you either. Craig's face flushed a deep, volatile red. His theatrical smirk vanished, replaced by unhinged aggression. He pointed a trembling finger right at my face. "Get out!" he snapped, his voice echoing off the walls. "Security, remove her from this premises immediately. I will not have my celebration ruined by a jealous failure." I ignored his shouting. I opened the folder and pushed the pages forward. Bright red county seals were stamped across the top of every single document. I slid the irrevocable trust agreement right in front of his dinner plate. I tapped my index finger hard on the signature line. "Jordan knew exactly what you were," I said, making sure the entire table heard every word. "He placed the garage and the cars into a protected trust 2 days before you walked into his hospital room. I am the sole executor." I slid the second paper over the power of attorney he used to steal the property. "Your notary stamp expired 3 months before Jordan supposedly signed this. You used a dead seal to commit felony fraud. You stole a dying man's life's work with a worthless piece of paper." Amber's face turned the color of wet ash. She reached out and grabbed Craig's suit sleeve. "Craig, stop," she whispered, her voice shaking with pure terror. She saw the red seals. She knew exactly what they meant. The relatives sitting around us physically recoiled. My uncle, the same man who laughed the loudest at the dollar bill, leaned back in his chair. He looked at Craig with raw, unfiltered disgust. The untouchable patriarch was suddenly just a common thief. Craig refused to submit. He yanked his arm away from Amber and pulled out his cell phone. He slammed the device onto the table and hit speakerphone. He dialed his high-powered corporate attorney. He wanted a show of brute force. The line clicked open. "David," Craig barked, his voice dripping with desperate authority. "My delusional daughter just handed me forged county documents. She is trespassing. I want her arrested for fraud immediately. Call the police." The entire room held its breath. The relatives braced for my collapse. Craig stood tall, puffing out his chest, expecting his expensive lawyer to crush me with a single sentence. The speakerphone crackled. David's voice echoed back, cold and entirely detached. "Craig, I just received a fax from the state notary board. They confirm the stamp on your asset transfer is fraudulent. You lied to my firm." Craig opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Do not contact this office again," David continued. "As of this exact moment, we no longer represent you. Good luck." The line went dead. The silence in the room was absolute. No one moved. Craig stood frozen, the sweat pooling on his forehead. The panic in his eyes was blinding. He stared at the dead phone, then at the red-stamped documents, finally realizing the cage was permanently locked. Melissa stood next to him. Her smug grin was gone. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. The heavy metallic keys to Jordan's Mustang slipped right through her fingers. They clattered loudly onto the hardwood floor. I stepped forward. I bent down, picked up the keys, and curled my fingers around the cold metal. I looked at Craig one last time. I turned around and walked out the heavy wooden doors, leaving them to their ruin. The American legal system does not care about country club memberships. It operates on cold, hard mechanics. Over the following weeks, the eviction process ground forward with absolute precision. Statutory grace periods expired. State-mandated redemption windows permanently closed. Craig frantically called his old networking contacts, begging for a bridge loan. No one in his elite circle wanted anything to do with a man whose toxic financial history was now a matter of public court record. When the final day of eviction arrived, I remained at my desk in Phoenix. I let the state attorneys handle the physical removal. A county sheriff pulled up to the long driveway of the estate. Armed officers knocked on the heavy oak doors, presenting the final court-ordered eviction notice. Craig and Amber were escorted out of the property under the watchful eyes of the exact neighbors they had spent decades trying to dominate. There was no grand audience this time. There were no caterers to command. Melissa was already gone. The second the trust froze the bank accounts, she abandoned them. She packed her bags and fled the state without a backward glance, proving her loyalty carried a very strict price tag. That afternoon, the cell phone on my mahogany desk vibrated. The screen flashed Amber's name. I let it ring twice, picked up the receiver, and let the heavy silence stretch across the line. "Please," Amber whispered. Her voice broke immediately. She sounded small, panicked, entirely hollow. "We are loading the truck right now. We have nowhere else to go. Let us set up a payment plan. Just a few $100s a month. We can work this out over time. Please, do not take the house. It holds all our family memories." She was still trying to negotiate a deal. She was still pulling on that thread of familial obligation to save her own comfort. My voice stayed dead level. "Jordan needed a family once, too. You looked the other way. Now, look the other way for yourselves." Before she could form another word, I disconnected the call. I opened the contact settings, hit the block button, and permanently severed the final tie to my past. I set the phone down. I reached into my blazer pocket. My fingers brushed against the crumpled $1 bill Craig threw at me during that birthday party. It was supposed to represent my absolute worthlessness. I stood up, walked over to the heavy-duty paper shredder in the corner of my office, and fed the bill into the slot. The steel blades caught the paper, pulling it down with a sharp mechanical whir. In less than 2 seconds, the ultimate symbol of his tyranny was reduced to unrecognizable strips of waste. The ledger was finally balanced. The gavel falling in the Maricopa County courtroom sounded entirely different than the polite, manufactured applause at the country club. It echoed with absolute finality. The judge finalized the bankruptcy and fraud proceedings against Craig and Amber exactly 3 months after the birthday party. The court ordered the immediate liquidation of their remaining personal assets to cover the $450,000 they owed in back taxes, defaulted credit lines, and predatory bridge loans. The commercial trust absorbed the remaining equity. The country club formally revoked their membership, sending the notice of termination via certified mail. The neighbors they spent decades trying to impress turned their backs. Former business partners stopped returning their calls, treating their names like a contagious disease. Melissa, stripped of her endless funding, attempted to open another credit card using Amber's social security number. The bank flagged the transaction for identity theft, cutting her off entirely. The empire vanished, swallowed by the exact system of leverage Craig used to exploit everyone else. Justice arrived in manila folders, ledgers, and court orders. 4 months passed. The blistering Arizona heat softened into a mild, quiet winter. A plain white envelope arrived on my mahogany desk. The return address belonged to a low-income apartment complex on the industrial edge of the city. The handwriting was Amber's. She filled 3 pages with frantic, slanted cursive. She spun a desperate narrative about forgiveness, unbreakable family bonds, and how much she missed her daughter. She claimed Craig was sick, that they were starving, begging for just $2,000 to make rent. She wrote about the holidays. She weaponized memories of my childhood, trying to drag me back into the emotional mud, hoping to find the little girl who used to crave her approval. I read the words. My pulse stayed perfectly steady. My hands did not shake. I folded the letter back into its envelope and dropped it straight into the trash can. No reply, no anger. Just absolute, unbreakable silence. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. The air inside Jordan's garage smells like motor oil. fresh paint, and possibility again. I refused to sell the commercial lot. Instead, I established the Jordan Miller Vocational Center. We opened our wide bay doors to at-risk teenagers in Phoenix, kids who need a wrench in their hands, a safe place to land, and a community that actually believes in them. I hired 3 retired mechanics to run the shop. Every afternoon, the heavy metal doors roll up, and the sound of ratchets, air compressors, and loud laughter fills the space. I stand in the corner, watching a 16-year-old kid wipe grease from his forehead, looking at a rebuilt carburetor with absolute pride. Over in the corner, sitting under a pristine canvas cover, is Jordan's 1969 Mustang. We never drive it. It stays right there, a silent guardian watching over the kids he would have loved to teach. The heavy, suffocating silence of my old life is completely gone. I surround myself with people who show up, who tell the truth, and who build things instead of tearing them down. This is my family now. We earn our keep in grease and honesty, not in tailored suits and empty promises. You spend years thinking you are the problem. You shrink yourself to fit into a chair at a table built on illusions. Craig and Amber operated under the delusion of the empty wallet. They measured human value purely by financial compliance, treating bank accounts as substitutes for character. To a narcissist, wealth is not just currency, it is a weapon of psychological control. They do not love their children. They love the reflection of their own power in their children's obedience. Keeping up appearances is a terminal disease. It forces toxic families to consume their own blood just to maintain a perfectly curated lie in front of strangers. Silence is not submission. It is the ultimate incubator for undeniable justice. Toxic people thrive on your emotional reactions. They want your tears. They want your screaming matches. They use your outrage to paint you as the unstable one to the rest of the world. Give them nothing. Starve them of your panic. Use that quiet time to build a fortress they cannot breach. You do not need to announce your counterattack. You just need to execute it. A foundation built on stolen dignity will inevitably crush its architect. You cannot purchase genuine respect with forged power. The universe, or the legal system, always audits the ledger eventually. Craig thought he could bury my brother and dance on his grave in a tailored suit. He forgot that every action leaves a paper trail. Arrogance makes people sloppy, and karma, when directed by patience, never misses its address. Blood makes you related. Loyalty, respect, and protection make you family. We are conditioned to believe that sharing DNA means absorbing abuse. It is a lie. Sometimes, the most heroic act of love you can perform is completely cutting out the cancer of toxic relatives. You sever the limb to save the body. You protect the legacy of those who actually mattered, and you protect your own peace. If you are sitting at a table where your worth is constantly handed to you in crumpled $1 bills, how much longer are you going to wait before you buy the whole damn room? You have the power to rewrite the deed to your own life. You have the right to walk away. Drop your story in the comments below. Let us build a community of people who finally stopped paying the price for someone else's ego.